Welcome back. Today we're talking all about how to find and catch fall walleyes quickly, because as always time is limited, but especially in the fall because the days are a little bit shorter. And so one of the first things that you need to do when you go to any body of water is kind of identify the primary bite, because not every lake is going to set up the same way, and there's going to be a lot of different bites going on a lot of these different lakes, but there's typically a primary bite where the majority of fish and the majority of aggressive fish are going to be. So identify, whether it's talking to your bait shops, whether it's talking to some buddies or some other people that you know that fish, identify that primary bite, and that's going to really help to shrink that time that you are going to need to find these fish. The primary bite that I'm going to be targeting today is the shallow sandy flats. This is a ton of fun, and there's a lot of these bites going on, especially on some of our bigger bodies of water in Minnesota, that kind of mid to large size, whether it's talking leech or they're talking cass or winnie or some of those. A lot of these shallow sandy bites really turn on. And so now that I kind of have that in mind, the first thing that I want to do is I want to change my map. I want to kind of start to get a little bit of a broad depth range. So for me right now, I'm setting my depth range from that 5 to 15 foot range, just because I'm assuming they're going to be in that depth range, and as I go, then I'll narrow that down. And so as I'm looking at my map, I'm looking for these large, flat, sandy areas, and bonus if they are adjacent to any maybe break lines or some deep water or some weeds or some rocks. If you can find them adjacent to some of those, even better. But sometimes those big, expansive flats are going to be where those fish are just roaming. So now that you've got your map dialed in, now you're gonna find some fish. And that can be done in a few different ways. If you don't have much for electronics, honestly, you can identify these areas on the map and you can drift with the wind, with a jig and a minnow or a Lindy rig. You can also use a trolling motor to troll crankbaits or spinners, cover a little bit more ground over some of these areas. If you have even a little bit of electronics, maybe it's 2D sonar, you can drive around, try to mark fish. One of the biggest pieces of equipment that you can have as far as electronic goes for the shallow sandy bite is side imaging. I've talked a lot about that. That's what I'm going to be using today. That's what I'm going to show you here in a little bit, how to find these fish on your side imaging. And I kind of like to use my side imaging as like my macro, my kind of big scale. I can move fast, I can cover a lot of water. And then I will also, once I identify where these fish are, then I'll use my live scope to kind of pinpoint these fish and pinpoint my cast. But even if you don't have forward-facing sonar, this is a very easy to do with your side imaging, especially if you can find them in some big groups. So I'm gonna get driving and just really break down some of this water. All right, so I just got to my first area here. I'm gonna start driving around with the side imaging. And one of the things that I'm going to say as kind of my first tip is to vary depth. It's very easy to get kind of hearing that the fish are biting in one depth and get stuck into that single depth. But these fish can move throughout the fall, depending on water temps, depending on bait. So don't get stuck into one depth range. Like I said, mine is from 5 to 15. So I'm gonna be kind of S-ing around in that kind of depth range, trying to find where some of these fish are at. And the other thing that you can do is you can look for bait. So don't get stuck just looking for fish. You can look for bait. It might show up on your 2D, it might show up on your side imaging, or if you're using forward-facing sonar, it's gonna show up on there. That can be something that you can key in on as you're driving around looking for these fish. And a few other things that you can look at is just looking for something that's different. That might be a bottom change, that might be hard to soft bottom. You know, a lot of times we're looking at sand, but that could be maybe some of these low-lying weeds or some dead weeds or some grass. Or maybe there's a little bit of rocky, rubbly stuff that are on the edge of these, or some little bit bigger weeds. Anytime you can find an oddity on these, it's gonna be something that's going to draw some fish. There you can see one fish, oh, maybe two, maybe one on each side. So maybe you have three, but they're pretty spread out. There you can see, I'll go mark that. So you can see a few off to that left side, pretty spread out and not in very big groups right now. But you can see a few fish mixed in there. So we're starting to see some life. And so that's in kind of like that 10, 11, 12 foot range. That one's sitting at about 11, I would say. So we're gonna keep driving, see if we can find some more fish. There you can see a few more. There's a group of about 4, 5, 6 on the left. A few that really caught that shadow on the left. And then you see just a few singles mixed around. That's again right around that 11 foot range. One thing that I do like to do as well is I will go and mark these fish for the day here, just to kind of get an idea if there's a specific area, specific line. Especially these fish are so spread out, so they may not be a situation where I can come right back to that waypoint and they're sitting on it, but at least having a general idea, seeing depth ranges, seeing any little patterns that we can put together. All right, so we're seeing fish, but they're definitely spread out. And some days they get like that where they get kind of scattered. Some days they get pretty grouped up. The one thing that I did notice is pretty nondescript, but where I saw most of these fish is where those, I wouldn't even call it a break line, but where those contours are a little bit closer together. They seem to be pretty consistent along there. I tried out to like 15, tried up to like 5. Wasn't seeing much. It was mostly in like that 9 to 12 foot range, especially like that 11 foot range. So we're gonna turn around, try to pinpoint a few of these fish a little more specifically with the live scope. Couple there. Oh, you see a few. 2, 4, kind of spread out a little bit. We're gonna inch our way closer to those ones. You got a couple there. Let's see what they react like. Give it some pops here. Oh, there's a few more over there. Oh, that one followed for a second. Still following. Try to lift it up here. There you bit. There you bit. That one I actually had to pull it up. Usually when I'm fishing these sandfish, I have to get them to eat it right off bottom, but that one wanted it chasing a little bit. Oh, sweet little walleye. Now we're talking. Didn't take too long. Sweet little eater size walleye. I'm not keeping any fish today, but awesome. That didn't take very long. You can see, even though there wasn't those big groups, that was the first fish that I really got to cast around, and it bit. Took a little while though. I'm using this tungsten stand-up jig by Norfin. I think it's new this year. And I really like that for these sandfish because one of the things you'll notice, there's a lot of times where these fish do not want to eat it hovering it above their heads. They just want it either sliding right along the sand, just moving slowly, or more often than not, they want these little pops, pop, pop. And I tried that a little bit, did not want, but it was still following. So this one, I actually hovered it up in the air like they don't typically want. And sure enough, that's what it took to bite. So we're gonna see what the next one is, but good little start here. And there were a few more fish up there. See if they're, yep, I can actually already see them on the live scope. A few more fish up there, kind of nice, they're staying put. Got a nice overcasty day, which helps a lot when targeting these shallower fish. I'm gonna pan around before I move ahead just a little bit. Yeah, up there about 60, 70 feet maybe. Oh yeah, you can see a few of them. I'm gonna try to go for those first one so I don't spook them all here. There's one a little closer at about 30. See if this, oh, he sees it. Give it some pops. Pop, oh, didn't want that. He's coming back around though. Yep, that guy wanted it hovering there too. Immediately next cast here, just a bunch of perfect eaters. Oh, nice eater. That's a lot of times we get on these sand flat, and actually popped right off. There we go. Great eater size. And now that I think of it, I think I am gonna keep a few fish here. Kind of got a hankering for some fresh walleye. Well, sweet, we are going to go catch one more of those, and then we're gonna kind of talk through some of the setup. There's still a couple hanging out over there. We can get around those guys. See if that go, he turned around. Oh, he snapped at it right away. Oh, and I got antsy. See if my bait is still on. Nope, pulled off the head. Well, 3 fish, or 3 casts, 3 fish, 3 bites. Only 2 fish to show though. That one I got a little antsy. One or two is kind of hanging around. 2 are hanging around following. Last time they wanted it. This time I'm just gonna let it go to bottom. Typically what I see is a lot of fish that like it either slow pulling on bottom like this, or the other thing is giving those little pops. Pop, pop. When I give those pops, I'll put a little pressure on it first, just in case that fish picked it up. Pop, and we'll try to slowly lift up, see if it'll follow. It's following, it's still interested. Get it to chase. Ooh, go back down. Not wanting that, so I'll maybe try to do a little more snap. Try to trigger something. So when I say pop, that's moving it maybe a foot. I'm snapping it here. I'm probably moving it more like 3 feet, not quite to the style of reaction bait. Didn't want that. Just let it sit and drift for a second, pull on bottom again. Sometimes you just gotta see what they're looking for. This guy's not interested. Well, he still is interested, but those first couple were just super aggressive. This guy, not so much. Pan around here before I keep moving in case I see anything I want to cast at. Nope. All right, let's keep moving. That is the other nice thing about this trolling motor is we're doing it this style. I can put it on very fast and I can cover a lot of water very quickly. I know I've talked about that in some of my suspended stuff, but man, being able to cover so much water and also scanning with your live scope is so nice. Just being able to fish a lot more efficiently. Again, I have those 2 50 amp hour Amped Outdoors lithiums, made the jump this year, and I am not looking back at this point. It was definitely a good change. There, he bit it right on the drop. He saw that guy go down, but I wanted to give it an extra second just because those last ones have kind of slacklined me and they haven't, been there. Sweet. Another perfect one for the box here. So I'm gonna really quickly talk setup. Like I talked earlier, I'm going with the Norfin tungsten stand-up jig. I like tungsten just because obviously you can get away with a smaller size hook for the same amount of weight. This one, it doesn't matter as much on sand, but sometimes that little extra noise will also help if there's some rocks down there. But the other thing is you can feel so much better with the tungsten. It just transfers that sensation so much more, whether it's the fish's mouth, whether it's bottom, whatever it is. And so I like that on, this is the 6 10 inch. It's the medium light extra fast. This is the Elliott Identity series. Super nice rod. And this is on the Piscifun Illumix 2000. You can see that there. And I like anywhere from like a high 6 to low 7 foot rod, you know, like a 6'10" to a 7'3". The other rod that I really like by Elliott is the 7'3" medium light extra fast. Super nice rod for casting, for working jigs. It's got some very good action. The one thing that you do want is you want a little bit of a soft tip. I don't know if my rod, if it's focusing on that, but we'll see. You want a little bit of that soft tip because, as you've seen on a couple of these bites, not as much today, but a lot of times it's on that pop. And so you want that soft tip to be able to identify that bite, but not give them a lot of pullback, not give them a lot of resistance, so they can tell that they have something pulling back on them. Especially when I'm doing some of this pop jigging, this snap jigging, I'll snap it up and then I'll just start a very slow lift up. And I do that because a lot of times, just like that fish on the initial cast, they will bite it as it's hitting bottom. They'll trap it to bottom, and that's when they'll hit. You know, a couple of these have needed it to be kind of hanging off bottom, but having that soft tip can really help you identify those bites before they feel them, before they spook. Again, a very versatile setup. I am running that on an 8-pound braid. You can see it. This is some high vis. It's getting towards the end of the year here, so getting a little worn out. But the other thing that I have been doing a lot more recently is I have been doing an FG knot. I don't know how well you can see that, but I've been switching to that FG knot because it just runs through the guides a little bit better. You know, I'm in fishing in some clear water, so I want a little bit longer leader. So when I'm running a little bit longer leader, obviously that's going to be going through the guides a little bit more. And so when it's going through those guides, you want that very thin knot as much as possible, so it's not getting caught up, not anything like that. And that FG knot, from things that I've seen, it's actually a stronger knot than the uni knot, but it's a little bit thinner, goes through those guys super nice, something I've been doing a lot. And then I have that from the 8-pound braid to, I think I went to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. I'll go anywhere from like 6 to 12, even depending on the body of water, depending on the style that I'm fishing. The other thing I could do is I'm fishing pretty shallow. So I'm in 11, 12 feet. So this is a 1/4 ounce. I probably should honestly go down to an 1/8, could even go down to a 1/16. But typically I like to work fast. So that is kind of why I went with that 1/4 to be able to get that kind of snap jig. So we got a few more tips for you, but we're gonna go catch another fish first. There, I actually just saw a few marks on the side imaging. I'll kind of show you that here quick. Just because even when you're kind of stationary, you can see they are right there. So you can see those fish on the side imaging. As I turn around, I was actually just walking back up from putting bait on. And, oh, there they are. And so I was planning on keeping moving this way, but I saw those on the side imaging, so might as well cast. So even when you're stationary, you can still see, especially on these sandy flats like this, you can still see a lot of times some of these fish. You bet. Yep. I knew there was two. I thought I saw one coming up. I thought I saw one coming up, or at least sliding towards bottom here. I might just boat flip this guy. Another thing I will say is keep moving. Don't get stuck on one fish or a small group of fish. Keep moving. What you saw is I marked a big line of waypoints as I was driving. These fish were kind of scattered. There's definitely more fish on the live scope than I saw on the side imaging as I kind of worked through this more slowly. But I kept moving. I didn't get stuck on the first group of fish. I kept moving. The first couple were active, the next ones weren't. Keep moving from group to group. If you're going along a whole stretch like this and you're not getting bit, they're not active, then I make a wholesale move. I move to a completely different area, go find new fish. That doesn't mean you can't come back, but I would rather go try to find some active fish, and then if I can't find any, come back to see if they're active a little bit later. Jeez, that guy was feisty. That will be a good one to close things out, I think. Oh yeah, perfect. Man, if all these could be like this would have been a pretty quick evening. Well, there we go. That'll finish us out here for our fish. Last few tips though, you know, I've been using jig and minnow, and some of the other presentations that I really like to do with this shallow sand bite is I really like using reaction baits, especially if it's a little bit smaller, lighter size. Just sometimes triggering those bites is the only way to get these fish to bite. Slip bobber is another very effective, especially if they're potted up. Today, for whatever reason, they were just kind of scattered. And if they're potted up, slip bobbers are one of the most effective things that you can do. And another thing I will say, don't neglect using night crawlers. I know as it gets towards fall, kind of general rule of thumb is switch to minnows. But I still really like to use night crawlers. And if you cannot get bit on anything else, if you're willing to spend a little more money, sometimes rigging big minnows is the best thing that you can possibly do. I mean, when they won't bite on other things, they will bite on a big minnow sometimes in the fall. Otherwise, if you want to check out some of my other favorite fall walleye locations, I'll put that one right here. And if you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and subscribe right here. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.